So welcome back everyone. We have now understood in previous few lectures that what happens if you apply 90-degree pulse on equilibrium magnetization and what happens if you detect it. So let us revise a little bit. So here is the 90-degree pulse followed by acquisition. So let us say that the phase of the pulse is Y and it is applied onto the proton channel, right? Okay. So the equilibrium density matrix to start with is Iz. This when you apply 90, let's write it as Iy. So I here is, let's say, the proton. Okay. You get Ix. That is, at this point you get Ix as the density operator, and once you let it evolve, this is for an isolated spin half system. So you let it evolve during the acquisition period. It will gather the chemical shift information cos omega t and z operating on x. So the Hamiltonian here is omega Iz, right? Or in time independent form, if you want to write, then it will be capital omega, and then z operating on x will give you y, so you will have Iy sine capital omega t, right? And if you take the, let's call it as sigma t, and to detect, what you have to do is you have to take the trace of sigma t into I plus operator, and then whatever you got is nothing but, let's say, this is e to the power I omega t. That's the oscillating part of the signal, and then if you also incorporate the relaxation component, minus tr2. Okay, and if you remember, we also discussed that the actual sigma 0 is of the form h cross omega I Iz n k beta kbt, right? And we said that since this, all of this is constant, we can always multiply it later. So the actual form of trace comes out to be h cross omega I n kbt e to the power I omega t e to the power minus t r2. So this tells you the oscillating part, this tells you the decay part, and this is the amplitude part, right? So if you now do the Fourier transformation of this, what you get is a signal over here at omega t. Of course, the line width is given by r2 over pi, right? So let's draw it with little broad line. So line width at half height is given by this, and this height, the intensity, is given by this constant over here, which is h cross omega I n kbt. So this gives you the intensity. So we can say that because all of these are constant, so we can say that the intensity is proportional to omega I. Okay. So why are we discussing about intensity? Because it depends what is the nuclei. So the intensity, on, in addition to the population difference and all, it depends on the gyromagnetic ratio, which in turn comes into as omega I is in the intensity, right? So let's say if we are recording 13C spectrum, okay, so nothing fancy about it. All you have to do is you have to do the same 90-degree pulse followed by acquisition 90y. The difference is that instead of applying this pulse on proton channel, now we are applying it on C13 channel. So that means the signal will be same. This will be omega c, but the intensity factor will now be, intensity will be proportional to omega c instead of omega h in this case, right? So here the intensity was proportional to omega h. So why is this important? Because omega h is approximately 4 times that of omega c, right? So then you lose a lot of intensity when you record C13 spectrum, right? In addition to population related loss of signal, uh, this omega related loss of signal is also there. So the spectrum has poor sensitivity because, just barely, because the gamma value of carbon is 1/4 of that of proton, right? And this is true for all other nuclei. I have just taken C13 as an example. So this is true for all other nuclei, right? So what do you do in such a case? Okay, so there is one important thing which we had learned, that signal to noise ratio is proportional to gamma of excited nuclei raised to the power 1 and gamma of detected nuclei raised to the power 3 by 2. Okay, so now if we have to detect C13, we can't do anything. We have to detect C13 because we are interested in getting C13 spectrum. But what if we can change the excitation nuclei? So here we are exciting C13 and detecting C13, right? But so we don't have any choice in changing the detecting nuclei, the nuclei which is being detected, but we do have a choice in excitation nuclei. Okay, so what do I mean by that? So I mean that we can excite proton and detect C13. So in such a situation, the gamma, so signal to noise ratio will now be proportional to gamma of H and gamma of C, right? Here it was gamma of C to the power 3 by 2 and gamma of C to the power 1, right? So now if you take the ratio of let's say signal to noise 1, signal to noise 2. So now if you take the ratio of these two, signal to noise in one case versus signal to noise in second case, what you will have is gamma C 3 by 2, gamma H, gamma C 3 by 2, right? So this factor cancels out, and what you are left with is 1 by 4, right? So you have this will be 4 times gamma, so you will have, so basically in this situation when you are exciting proton and detecting carbon, you are increasing the signal to noise by 4-fold, right? Which is a huge increase. So all you have to do is excite proton and detect carbon. But now how do we excite proton and detect carbon? Because if we are exciting the proton, then the magnetization is on proton. Now somehow we have to shift the magnetization, or in other words coherence. We have to shift the coherence from proton to C13. So this is what we are going to discuss today. The name of the experiment is abbreviated as INEPT. So this is a very, very famous scheme which is used in almost all multidimensional NMR experiments. We'll come to what is multidimensional, but it's a very famous block which is, or module, which is used in lot of NMR experiments, and it is called as insensitive nuclei enhanced by polarization transfer. So what you are doing is you're transferring the polarization from sensitive nuclei to insensitive nuclei, and hence the sensitivity is increasing. Okay, so let us see what do we do in this. So it's composed of very simple sequence of pulses which we have already learnt. It is basically composed of a 90-degree pulse plus spin echo, which we have learnt already, plus two 90-degree pulses simultaneously, one on proton channel, one on 13C channel. This part also we have learnt. We have seen that this part is used to transfer the coherence, right? If there is a antiphase coherence at this point, you can transfer the coherence from proton to C13 if you apply two simultaneous 90 degree, right? So all we are going to do is combine all three elements together to create a new element or new module, which is called as inept. So let us see what inept looks like. So this is not a hit and trial design. All these kind of designs which we are discussing, design of pulses and delays, these are mathematically calculated very precisely, so we exactly know what is happening with the magnetization or what is happening with the coherence at each given point. And this is all designed by calculation and not by chance. Okay, so let us see what we have here. So this is 90 tau, 180 tau, followed by 290 degrees, and here this is a proton channel, this is 13C channel. So here you have tau 90 and followed by acquisition. So now if you see that there is no excitation pulse, there is no 90 degree pulse on C13, right? So if there is no C13 90 degree C13 pulse, we are not exciting carbon channel here, right? We are not converting CZ to CX or CY, right? This step is not being done unlike the one pulse experiment done on C13 where we are having 90 degree followed by excitation. We are not doing this here, right? So there is no 90 degree pulse on carbon channel to start with. So what are we starting with? We are starting with proton 90 degree pulse. So let us also write down the phases of this. So 90Y, tau, tau, and this tau starts right after the pulse, and you have 180x, let's say 180x, and then you have 90x and 90x. Okay, so we have defined the phases as well as the pulse lengths. Now let's start with the density operator calculation. So sigma 0, let's see what is sigma 0. So sigma 0 is omega h hz plus omega c cz, right? So proton and carbon, so this is, let's say it's a case of proton connected to carbon and there is one bond scalar coupling between proton and carbon, right? This is not zero. Okay, so this is also spin half system, this is also a spin half system, right? So it's a case of two spin system which are weakly coupled. Why weakly coupled? Because omega h and omega c are far apart as compared to the one bond scalar coupling constant, which is roughly 150 hertz or something. So this value is roughly 150, let's say, hertz. Okay, all right. So so since it is weakly coupled, so we'll be having chemical shift scalar coupling Hamiltonian as Iz Hz Cz, right? So we'll see that. So let us evolve both of these terms one by one through this array of pulses and delays. So let's start with omega c cz because this is easier to evolve. So first period here is 2 pi j. There is free precession 2 pi j hz cz. So there is no chemical shift evolution during spin echo period. So that's why we are not applying chemical shift Hamiltonian here, right? So I'll directly apply the scalar coupling Hamiltonian. Now Hz Cz operator commutes with Cz, so it's not going to change anything. So basically it remains same, right? Then you apply 180 on Cx. So 180 Cx operator applies on omega c Cz. So this changes the sign and nothing else. Cz. So again you So this is the result of 180 degree pulse. Now again you apply tau delay, so this will be 2 pi j hz cz. Again this operator commutes with this, so no change, so you are left with omega c cz, right? Now you have 90 degree pulse on carbon. So if you have 90 cx, what do you get if you apply 90 degree pulse on carbon? You basically are rotating this by 90 degrees, and the magnetization goes towards omega c cy, and the negative sign becomes positive. So I hope that you can now calculate all of these calculations using the old operator, new operator, cos theta, sin theta formula, right? So now if you notice that this is a in phase term, right? This is at this point of time, sigma 1, let's say, right? So sigma 1 is in phase here, and if now I will evolve this and take a trace, what do I get? I will get a in phase doublet, right? Because it is coupled to proton, so I will get a in phase multiplet. So that means what I will get, the spectra I will get is something like this. I'm sure you should be able to do this evolution using chemical shift and scalar coupling, and then take a trace with I plus and then do Fourier transformation. So you will get omega c, at plus omega c, this value will be 2 pi j hc, and this height will be proportional to omega c, right? So this height will be proportional to omega c, because that is the that is coming in density operator, right? Okay, so now let's say so this is only one part of the equilibrium density operator. Now let's operate the second part, omega h hz. Okay, so we'll do the same sequence of commands as per this pulse program. So you have omega h hz. So first you have a 90 y pulse. So let me write the full operator, 90 on hy, because the pulse is only on the proton channel, so it will only operate on hz and not cz. So what you will get here is if you do y on z will give you a plus x, so you will have omega h hx. This will be again there would not be any chemical shift evolution. So during spin echo there is no chemical shift evolution, so although the Hamiltonian will be there, but I am not applying that Hamiltonian. So I will straight away apply scalar coupling Hamiltonian here, 2 pi j hz cz, right? So what do I get here? So you will have omega h x, this was x, cos pi j tau, and if I apply z on x I will get y, so this will be omega, and this will be 2 h hy cz, and sine pi j tau. So now I assume my tau equal to 1 over 4j. In that case my cos pi j tau is equal to sine pi j tau is equal to 1 by root 2, right? So because this becomes 45, so you will have 1 by root 2. So now I can simplify this. So I can write this as 1 by root 2 omega h hx plus omega 1 by root 2 hy cz, right? So this is after operating one evolution period, scalar coupling evolution. Now let's apply. You have 180 degree pulse on hx, and you also have 180 degree pulse on cx, right? Both are x phase, so I'm writing x over here. So X phase means it does not change anything here because this is Hx. It changes the sign of Hy, it changes the sign of Cz, so that means it remains same. So basically set of 180-degree pulses does not do anything here. So what you are left with is 1 over, so the same operator comes over here, right? So I will save some time on writing. Okay, so now what do I get? Now I will apply 2 pi j hc cz again. So let us now apply the scalar coupling Hamiltonian again on both these terms. So what do I get? So here I will get 1 by 2 omega h hx plus 1 by 2 omega h 2 hx. So this will be 2 hy cz, and then this one plus 1 by 2 omega h 2 hy cz minus 1 by 2 omega h hx, right? So if you notice that these two terms get cancelled and these two are added up, so what you get here is half becomes 1. So omega h times 2 hy cz. Okay. Now an important point to note here that this is a antiphase term just before detection, right? So sigma 1 is antiphase. So in the previous case what we were getting, so here sigma 1 was in phase, right? So in phase will give you a in phase doublet, antiphase will give you a antiphase doublet, right? If I evolve this antiphase term further and take a trace, it will give me an antiphase doublet. Okay, so this is a antiphase doublet centered at omega c. Center will be at same frequency because it is modulated by same chemical shift of carbon, because we are detecting carbon. However, the difference is now the intensity is proportional to omega h. Okay. So here also intensity is proportional to, negative or positive, both the intensities are proportional to omega h, right? So now if I take the sum of, because both these terms are present, so we started with both of these terms one by one, so both of these terms are present, so that means the spectra will be a summation of these two, right? So overall spectra will look something like this. Where this line is omega h plus omega c, and this line is omega c minus omega h. Okay. Why minus? Because it is negative. So omega c was positive, so that's how it gets cancelled, and whatever is left comes here. But now you see that there is a okay, let us say that if omega h is equal to 100 units, then omega c will be equal to 1/4 of that, that is 25 units, right? So this is just a simple number to show you what is the advantage of doing inept. So now if I do that, that means this intensity, the original intensity of in-phase doublet was 25 units each. The antiphase has the doublet intensity as 100 and 100, right? Minus 100 and plus 100, because it is proportional to omega h. Now the summation of these two spectra gives you this, which means that while this line is 125 units, this line is 75 units, right? So you have gained 5 times of that of one pulse experiment. So one pulse experiment was giving you carbon intensity as only 25 units, but here it is giving you the carbon intensity as 125 units, and you have not lost. So the other line also is gained by 75 units. The only disadvantage is that it is negative. So why am I saying that it's a disadvantage? Because let's say if there are multiple nuclei, multiple spins in the system, let's say there are multiple carbons which are connected to proton, different protons. So you will have another signal which is, let's say, coming at this line, and its corresponding signal is coming negative at this line. Now these two green and black signals will get cancelled to each other if there is an accidental overlap between these two. Okay, so let's say this is carbon A and this is carbon B in a system like this. Okay, and let's say if carbon B has a chemical shift which overlaps with the second line of carbon A, in that case these two lines will get cancelled to each other, and what you will get is something which is like this, right? So this center line will be missing. There is no line here, which gives you a false spectra. It is not a correct representation of the spectra, right? So that is the disadvantage. However, the advantage is, the big advantage here is that you get increased intensity in the line, right? So your signal to noise ratio is increased. All you have done is, there is no change in concentration of the sample. There is no other special technique. All you have done is that you have made use of this small formula over here, that the excitation, if you excite high gamma nuclei, then your signal to noise will be higher, right? So here we have made use of that, and similarly we can make use of this in proton nitrogens, proton, or let's say we can transfer proton to nitrogen, we can transfer carbon to nitrogen. Here we have done proton to carbon, and so on and so forth, right? So any sensitive nuclei can transfer its polarization to insensitive nuclei, and we can gain in signal to noise ratio, right? Okay, so now let us look at this disadvantage. Like, is there a way to convert this line into a positive line so that we get a better sensitivity and no cancellation of signals? Okay, so let us see that. So if you remember that we have learnt that any spin echo block can be used to convert in-phase magnetization to anti-phase magnetization, right? So here we are getting a problem of anti-phase magnetization at the end. So what if we apply one more spin echo block to convert that anti-phase magnetization to in-phase magnetization? So what I mean is, so I refocus the anti-phase component into in-phase component by applying another set of spin echo. So my original pulse was 180x, 180x, 90x, 90x. Oh, I did not apply. Wait. So in the previous one, I forgot to apply the 290s actually. So here 90x and 90x on proton and 90x on carbon was to be applied, which will give you actually, so here the magnetization was on proton, and by applying this simultaneous 90 degree, what you get is omega h 2 h z c y, right? So this is the correct antiphase, which is actually equal to sigma 1. Okay. So I forgot this part. Okay. So now if you apply these two, so you get the antiphase in carbon with respect to proton, right? This was wrong to say that this won't give you the signal, right? So you have to convert this into antiphase in carbon. Okay. Now let's go back to refocused inept. So what we are doing here is we are adding one more tau 180 tau part over here. So while this part is called as up to this inept, insensitive nuclei enhanced by polarization transfer, this complete part is called as R inept or refocused inept, because we are refocusing the antiphase component which comes here back to in phase component. Okay, so now let's see what do we get here. So again we have so at this point we had two components. One was in phase in carbon, which was omega c cy, and now if you do tau 180x tau on this, what you are going to get is omega c 2hz cx. So in phase component, so you will get one in phase component, but that is modulated by omega c, which is less in intensity. We'll see what I mean. And the second component was at this point was omega h 2hz cy. And now if I do tau 180 tau, I request you all to do this calculation yourself. Now you should be able to do it yourself. So I'm skipping this step. So I'm writing the answer directly. So what I will get is minus omega h cx, which is a in phase component. I had written antiphase here, in phase here. So this is antiphase. Right. So that means this part will give me a spectra like this, centered at omega c, and the lower part will give me a spectra like this, which is in phase. I am drawing negative because my intensity or my sign over here is negative, which of course I can convert into positive by changing the phase of this last two pulses, but it's okay, let it be. So center here is omega c. Now if you see that this is 25, this is 25, this is 100, this is 100, so the resultant spectra will be 125 units negative, and sorry, this will be 75 units negative and 125 units negative. So now there is no way that peaks can get cancelled with each other. There is both the peaks are negative. So this is something similar to in phase doublet, but there is some intensity difference. So this is a in phase doublet, no loss of intensity because of cancellation of peaks. So the negative part of inept, which was there, that one of the peak was positive, one of the peak was negative, that has been refocused in refocused inept or R inept, right? So that disadvantage has been converted into an advantage. So now you have got the intensity contribution from proton, which has been now converted into a carbon magnetization, right? So that's how the inept is useful. Now one of the biggest side effect is that this type of pulse program works only for carbons which are connected to proton, where there is a one bond scalar coupling present between proton and carbon. For quaternary carbons where there is no let's say this kind of system where there is no proton, the magnetization cannot be transferred to this carbon, and hence you will not get any signal for quaternary carbons in this case, right? So one advantage you can say is that you will filter out all the signals which do not have protons connected, so you will get signals only corresponding to protonated carbons. And one disadvantage is that you lose the information on carbons which do not have protons. So either way, I mean, that really depends on what is your requirement, what kind of spectra or what kind of molecule you are dealing with. But the advantage is a big gain in signal to noise. I think so I will give you one more home exercise here. So so in addition to doing this calculation and looking at the answer, matching your calculation, matching the answer with your calculations, so I would also insist you to calculate the coherence orders at each step. So because now we have learned what is coherence order, how coherence order can be calculated given a density operator. So you know the density operator at each point, right? So you know what is here, let's say 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So all these 8 points, and you know what is the density operator, how density operator is changing, you can precisely calculate that. So you should also be able to calculate what is the coherence order and how coherence order is changing from P equal to 0 to, so I will tell you the final density, final coherence order. It should go from P equal to 0 to P equal to, so in this case, because we have not selected it, so we'll say plus minus 1. So let's see if you can actually trace the order of coherence along the pulse program, right? So that is all for today. So if you have any questions or any doubts regarding calculations, we'll discuss during the interaction session. Thank you.